Yeah,
Okay,
hit and record.
awesome. Okay, thank you all so much for joining us for this important conversation about COVID, stress awareness, and the return to school. I'd like to acknowledge that we are presenting from Treaty 6 and the homeland of the Métis people. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to all the teachers and school administrators and counselors who are joining us. I know that your job is so challenging even in the best of times, and then in a COVID state, all your stressors are amplified and multiplied. And I also want to extend a thank you to the parents who have joined us and the community workers in the various roles that you play in supporting families. This is such an important topic because we know from research that if we're experiencing too much stress, it's really hard to learn. So for those children going back to school in a COVID state, their stressors are amplified just like the teachers. So we know that it's hard to teach and it's hard to learn. So the more we can understand stress, what it is, and how we experience it in our brain and body, the more we can start to work with that knowledge to gain strategies for self-regulation. So my name is Connie Herman, and I am the Nobody's Perfect Parent Program Coordinator for Saskatchewan. Nobody's Perfect is a Public Health Agency of Canada program that's been around since the 1980s. I hope that many of you have heard of the program. And I am also a self-reg facilitator. So I've been trained in a course called Self-Reg, and it's through the work of Dr. Shanker in the Merit Center. I'm also a trainer in Kids Have Stress Too, and have taken many other courses related to stress. And I'll let Jackie introduce herself.
Great, thanks, Connie. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So I am the Community Action Program for Children, also known as CAPC. I'm the Training and Education Coordinator in Saskatchewan. CAPC is also a Public Health Agency of Canada funded program, and it works to help local community groups focus on the priority health and development needs of children 0 to 6, as well as their families who are living in conditions of risk. I wanted to share a little bit of information about the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute, as both Connie and I work at the Institute. We are a provincial nonprofit organization, and we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. At the Institute, we all believe that children, regardless of ability, deserve the best physical, social, and emotional health possible. Our focus is on reducing the occurrence of disabling conditions in children, and we do that through primary prevention methods. We have a variety of different programs, including early childhood mental health, FASD prevention, maternal and infant health, as well as parenting and some others. And all of our areas of focus have a lot of information on our website, so we'd highly recommend checking out our website if you haven't already done so. You can link to resources as well as order hundreds of things, and the vast majority of those are free. I also wanted to let you know, so for this presentation, Connie and I decided, due to technical glitches that we have experienced in the past, and we hope that we don't have any for this one, we pre-recorded the actual presentation. So we are still here. We'll be able to monitor the chat, and at the end, we'll shut off the video and be available. Hopefully, we'll have some time for questions, but we know we also had a lot of information we're sharing. So we are recording this presentation currently, and it will be on our website. And as soon as that link is available on our website, I will be sharing the link. So I think we're ready to go. Connie's got her screen sharing now.
Here you go. During this presentation, we will look at what stress is, what happens in our brain and body when we experience stress, and why stress results in certain behaviors. And finally, we will touch on some strategies that you can use to reduce stress and help yourself and children to self-regulate. One thing that Jackie and I have discovered is that stress awareness is an ongoing process that involves gaining a greater understanding of the science related to stress, then personalizing that information to fit our own experiences. As we reflect on our own stress and practice self-regulation strategies to reduce and prevent stress for ourselves, we also end up building a toolkit of knowledge and skills to help others. The information regarding stress is grounded in science and comes largely from the work of Dr. Stuart Shanker and his framework called Self-Reg. Dr. Shanker has a remarkable gift of taking theory, research, and practice from multiple disciplines and putting it all together, kind of like a puzzle, in a way that helps us see things a bit differently and ideally more clearly. Jackie and I like to refer to the science of stress as the head knowledge. The heart knowledge, so if you look at the heart on the side there, refers to how we take this information and make it make sense for ourselves. How do we personalize the information? So heart knowledge comes when we have those aha moments as we start to try to put the information into practice and apply it on a personal level. And throughout the presentation, Jackie and I will try to share a number of stories where the head knowledge started to make sense for us personally. And then, of course, everyone wants strategies. So we will discuss a number of strategies that you can start to put into your toolbox to help reduce your stress or the stress of your children around you. But we also want to emphasize that no two strategies or one or two strategies will work for everybody, and that even what works on one day for one person might not work on another day. So as an adult in a child's life, your ability to self-regulate yourself will be one of the most important tools that you can use to help the children in your lives to calm down and self-regulate. So what comes to mind when you hear the word stress? Just think of one or two things that come to mind, and you can write them down if you want. Some of the things that come to mind for many people are things like negative things, like bills, deadlines, or those adult type problems like that we need to deal with, not that we want to deal with, but we have to deal with them. We also don't really think of kids as having stress, but kids and adults and everybody has stress. So let's return to the original definition of stress. In this quote, Dr. Shanker says that stress is anything that requires our internal systems to burn energy in order to maintain some sort of internal balance. So this quote is drawn from the work of Hans Selye, who was the first person to coin the use of stress in relation to animals and humans. His original definition was any specific response of the body to any demand for change. By the 1970s, however, this concept of stress had turned into a buzzword that became synonymous with distress or negative stress, and it was generally associated with individuals' emotional states. Selye spoke 8 different languages, and English was not his primary language. And he struggled as he saw how the word had become associated with negative stress and how it was being used in general society. He said on numerous occasions that he had actually wished he had used the word strain. And this is where we're returning back to that original definition of his in this quote by Dr. Shanker. We see that he's returning to a more general idea of how our brains and bodies are all constantly responding to our internal and external circumstances. And our goal for this is that we're returning to a state of homeostasis or balance. So while we tend to think of stress as those big stuff, like the bills and deadlines and the things that we really have to get done, those things are actually stressors. And stress is the impact that the stressor has on our internal systems. So if you think about it this way, you can even think about the temperature change in a room. When it gets really cold, our body will try to adjust to try to reach that internal balance, that state that it likes to, that temperature that it likes to be at. So you might start to shiver, or if it gets really hot, your body will start to sweat in order to try to cool itself down. And our bodies are always doing this. They're always constantly adapting to the environments that we're in. Now, I just want you to imagine that you are sitting in a very comfortable space with a good friend of yours. There's no distractions around you, and you're just enjoying a wonderful conversation with your friend. You're exerting a lot of energy by talking and focusing on your friend, but you feel that the experience is so enjoyable that you're actually feeling more energized by the interaction. Now I want you to imagine that the environment has suddenly become very cold and very bright, and there's lots of people around causing lots of distractions. Maybe your phone is going off. And think about what's happening in your body as this is happening. Your brain and body are still having the same, you're still having the same conversation with your friend, but your brain and body are needing to exert more energy in order to focus on your friend and the conversation you're having. So in that kind of circumstance, you might actually leave the experience feeling very drained because your body is needed to use up more energy. So that's just one example, and this happens to us throughout the day all the time. So now Jackie's going to talk a little bit more about what happens in the brain and body when we experience stress.
Thanks, Connie. So to better understand what's happening in the body, we really need to understand what is happening in the brain. The triune brain, first described by Paul MacLean in 1973, is a simplified way to explain the brain. We know that there are many other parts, but for this presentation, we're going to focus on these three. So the reptilian brain, represented by the brown part in the picture, and represents the brainstem and controls the automatic functions of the body. So for example, this is breathing, your heart rate, digestion. The limbic system, represented by the red in the picture, houses the emotions and memories. And the neocortex, or the blue part, is the logical part of the brain where learning happens and decisions and judgments are made. As Connie mentioned, the body is always trying to maintain a sense of balance or homeostasis. The stress response is the human body's reaction to anything that throws it off balance. The body reacts with a fight, flight, or freeze response. This is also known as the stress response. This reaction happens on a physiological level that prepares your body to react to the threat that your senses and brain perceive, whether it is real or not. When we experience stress, some things that happen include the heart rate increases, chemicals or hormones such as cortisol or adrenaline are released, breathing becomes more shallow and rapid, muscles become tense, and the brain and body are on high alert for threats or danger, and it may become difficult to think logically. If a person experiences stress, the limbic system takes over. Our ancestors developed the stress response to help them escape from dangers such as the saber-toothed tiger. Today, COVID is our saber-toothed tiger. Some of us want to fight, get angry, yell, lash out. Others want to flee, avoid, become distracted, run away. And some of us freeze, ignore the situation, not listen or respond to others around us, or literally be unable to move. We are now going to show a video of Dr. Dan Siegel from the UCLA School of Medicine, because he uses the hand-brain model to explain the triune brain.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up, representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child. And that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
As Dr. Siegel says, we're able to teach the children we work with or live with about their brains. It is important for us to know that when we are functioning from our limbic system, we are wired for protection. We want to stay safe. When we are functioning from a whole brain state, we are wired for connection and can think logically and learn from and respond to others.
Thanks, Jackie. So this is an example of what stress can look like when we're looking at the behaviors or emotional states or even the thoughts of a person. So on the one end, where we have the sick guy there, that's the hypoarousal state. And this is where we have really low energy and maybe a lot of tension still, where it's really hard to even move maybe. You might look like a person's sad or tired, bored, just a lack of energy, but still a lot of tension. In the middle is the optimal state for learning and engaging with others. And this is the state we want our children to be in when they're in school and when they're learning these important subjects and topics, and where they're engaging with other people and their teachers in order to learn. This state looks like being happy, calm, focused, you're just ready to go and ready to learn. Then we start to move into the hyperarousal state. And that's where we have too much energy and tension to fit the situation. So it can look like the one guy where he's hyper, might be worried, silly or wiggly, anxious, or excited. So it could be excited too, right? We're thinking about these a lot in negative ways, but think about a child getting ready for a birthday party. They're really excited. But if it gets too excited, too much energy and tension for too long, it might turn into something like the temper tantrum. And that's where we're on the other end of the spectrum there for hyperarousal. And it can look like a temper tantrum, like a child getting mad, angry, maybe yelling, hitting. It's just this loss of control. and they're in that fight mode. So you can just see when you look at this picture of the different energy states that we can all be in. And throughout the course of the day, we might dip into any number of these states. So think about a child who has lots of energy and tension and they're trying to sit still in a desk for maybe an hour or two or more. And how you can see when they start to wiggle, how that, or they're moving around or talking, that's about the energy and tension levels that they have. It's not that they're trying to be bad or misbehave. It's that they just can't contain themselves. And they might need to be moving in order to try to focus and concentrate. When we think about states of energy and tension, instead of like misbehavior or looking at if they're even their emotional states, when we think about it just from this level, we start to take away the judgment, because it's easy just to see, oh yeah, like they have lots of energy or tension, or that they don't have enough. And then once you identify what state they're in, it's a little bit easier to identify what they might be needing. So if they're really wiggly and silly, they might need to get out and move around. If they're really tired or lethargic, maybe they need to have something to eat, a drink of water, get some fresh air. So it just takes away some of the judgment. Another way that you can think about it is by using the Thayer matrix. So this is another visual that we like to use that I've learned about through my education with self-reg. And it's another way of examining your own energy and tension levels. So if you look at the top left corner there, that's high energy and low tension. So that might look like when you're having that conversation that I was talking about earlier on with your friend in a really comfortable setting, and you're feeling energized by the conversation, but you don't really have anything that you're worrying about. Then as the stressors start to increase, we're talking about the cold weather or temperature or other distractions like noise, your phone ringing, maybe there's some weird smell going on. When you start to increase those stressors, your tension starts to increase as well. And you need to use more and more energy to try to be in that situation. So that's what that might look like on the right-hand corner, where you have high energy and high tension. And this is a good thing if you're going to be going and running a race or doing a presentation. Having high energy and tension might be necessary. But once it starts to get too high, you might start to forget what you're thinking or what you need to be saying, because the tension has got to be so much. Then on the lower left-hand corner there, we have low energy and low tension. And that is just being really relaxed, but not having a lot of energy to do things. So this might be an ideal state for if you're getting ready to go to bed. You want to be tired. You want to be in a space where you're ready to go and recharge your batteries. On the lower right-hand corner, we have low energy and high tension. So that you still have, like for me, I think of when I come home from a long day at work and I've just used up a lot of energy, but I still have to make dinner and the kids are still like, have things, homework or things that they need from me. So I still have lots of tension and things to do, lots of stressors, but I don't feel like I have as much energy to deal with those stressors. And you can use this as you're going throughout your day. You can use this as a way to just reflect on where your energy and tensions levels are and where you maybe need to try to work towards. So if my energy and tension levels are really high, then maybe I need to do some breathing exercises. Or if I'm really low energy and high tension, maybe I need to just go have a 20-minute nap, and then I can deal with whatever it is. So it's just one other tool that you can use. And we just want to do a really quick stress awareness moment of how energy and tension can feel in your body. So I want you to just tense all your muscles in your body as much as you can for just a second or two, and relax. And do that again. Tense all your muscles and relax. And if you're doing this with young kids, one way that you can think of it is spaghetti in a box and spaghetti in a pot. So you tense all your muscles really tight and pretend you're spaghetti in a box. And now pretend you're spaghetti in a pot, and you just wiggle all your arms and legs and your whole body around. Pretend you're spaghetti in a pot. And that's just a fun way of getting kids to be aware of tension and energy in their body, and then actually to help their body to relax as well.
So for me, a big aha when I was learning about stress and becoming aware of what was happening in my body was when I was watching TV, and that could be watching, some kind of high action show or hockey, something where there was a lot of activity, and I would notice, not immediately in it, but right after, that my entire body was tense. And it was in relation to what was happening. Even though it wasn't real, I wasn't playing hockey trying to score the goal. I wasn't in the car chase, but I was feeling the stress in my body. And then I would need to consciously just take a moment, take a deep breath, and then I could feel myself relax. When a person is experiencing stress, they're unable to think logically and make decisions that will help them learn or keep them safe. We're now going to show a video that is an excellent example of what happens if the limbic system takes over.
Let's hide the attic. No, in the basement. Why can't we just get in the running car?
Are you crazy? Let's hide behind the chainsaws.
If you're in a horror movie, you make poor decisions. That's what you do.
We can see that the people in the video are out of breath and frightened. The reptilian brain and the limbic system have taken over. Like Dan Siegel said, they have flipped their lids. They are unable to access their neocortex, or the logical part of their brain, to understand they need to take the running car to get away from the danger. When we see children acting in a way that we may consider misbehavior, they're not listening, fidgeting, they're talking out of turn, they may be experiencing stress. A big aha for me was when I heard Dr. Shanker say, it's not misbehavior, it is stress behavior. My perception of what a challenging behavior is shifted. It is important to know that all behavior is communication. When we think about stress, how it looks, and what is really happening, we can use the visual metaphor of an iceberg. The part that we see is the ice up above the surface. This part of the iceberg represents the challenging behavior. When we witness challenging behavior in children, we tend to label them negatively or view the person as misbehaving. Words like disrespectful, trouble, or bully come to mind. As teachers, parents, or caregivers, if we see this challenging behavior as misbehavior, then we use things like punishments or rewards as strategies to try to change the behavior. The reality is that these type of behaviors are symptoms of stress. Having a better understanding of the brain, stress, and the stress response helps us to realize that the challenging behavior is actually stress behavior. By recognizing this, we can become stress detectives and try to look deeper or below the surface. This lower part of the iceberg represents the hidden stressors that can impact our ability to cope. As a stress detective, we can reframe a child's behavior as a stress behavior and attempt to identify and reduce the stressors while teaching the child skills to respond.
So what does all this information about stress mean for kids as they go back to school? Well, one of the things that if we understand how we're impacted by stress, we can start to be that stress detective. If we see those types of behaviors where they're really hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, and we can start to think about, well, what could be going on for this child? And we can use kind of that image of the iceberg, where we're looking beneath the surface and we're being that whale, and we're looking and seeing what could be going on. Maybe it's the lights in the room, maybe it's the temperature, maybe it's that the child didn't get enough sleep. Or in our COVID world, there's the masks that kids have to wear and needing to distance themselves from other kids, and needing and having to refrain from giving that hug or the high five that they want to do. It can also be a lot of emotional stuff, like the change of routine, the excitement of going back to school, or fear of being judged. Maybe there's friend stuff going on for them. Or even things like not having the right clothes, or getting made fun of, or things like that can happen at school. Then there's the typical challenges of learning, and every child has a different capacity to learn information. They're all at different points in their learning. Some children might need more audio cues, some might need more visual cues. Maybe the mask on the teacher as they talk is making it harder for them to be able to hear, because they rely partly on watching the child or the teacher's mouth move. And then the subject matter itself can be very challenging to learn. So those are just some of the things that you can think about. And I want to share a story about just the other day as I was walking through a park. I noticed that there was a school or a classroom, they were all doing stretches out on the lawn, and there was 3 kids that were not participating in that way. They were standing up, and one child particularly was spinning in circles. And because I know this information, I was able to really recognize that right away as stress behavior. I could see that this child was actually trying to self-regulate. But I also could imagine the effect that he might be having on the other students or even the teacher. And if we see this behavior, if we regard it as being annoying, or that they're just acting out, then the teacher might yell at the students, or other kids may make kind of harsh comments towards him. But if we recognize that this child is really actually has high tension and energy right now, and they're trying to calm themselves down, then we can be more understanding, and we can use strategies that will help them to guide them to calm themselves down. So maybe it's like suggesting to the boy that he go take a little walk, or maybe have a sip of water, get back into his body. Different strategies that you can use. And you can also think about prevention strategies that they might need in that kind of a situation. So even as a parent, with your kids off at school, you might have a kid who is very well behaved at school. That doesn't mean that they're not stressed. They might be keeping it together and then come home, and all of a sudden it all is let out at home. So another story that I have about my son, who a couple years ago walked in the door and just started yelling at me because of the lunch that I had made him. And I was ready to flip my lid, like Dan Siegel says. I was ready to tell him that, he's being ungrateful and he can make his own lunches, and how dare he talk to me like that. But I was able to recognize this as stress behavior, that this wasn't typical of him. And I was able to say, why this, why now? Which is another thing that Dr. Shanker encourages us to think about when we try to be a stress detective. And by doing that, I could calm myself down, like Dan Siegel talks about. I was able to take that pause. And I said to my son, did something happen at school today? And instantly he broke down. And there was a situation that had happened at school where he felt like he was being teased, and he was holding it together until he got home. So because I had asked him that question, we were able to work through what had happened to him, and it wasn't at all about the lunch. So you can see in that kind of a situation where we think it's about one thing, but it's actually about another. And when we practice being the stress detective and come to the real root reasons for the stress, they can really help to minimize those stressors, or maybe make them go away altogether. And then by doing that, the behavior goes away. So what does returning to school in a COVID state mean for teachers? Well, as you can see, the teacher all of a sudden has many additional responsibilities. When you think about back to the iceberg kind of thoughts or image, we can think about things like that have always been stressors for teachers, teaching the different subjects and the curriculum, trying to teach to each student, even though they are at different spaces in their learning, or process information differently. And all those other physical stressors that have always been there, like the lights and the temperature and maybe being hungry. But now in a COVID state, there's all these other things of expecting to keep children at a safe distance from one another, children wearing masks, they have to wear masks. I was talking with a teacher just the other day who was wearing a clear mask so that kids could read her lips, which was great. But she said that she's having a really hard time with it because it's making her sweat a lot. So there's lots of trial and error for teachers, and they have to give themselves a bit of a break. This is where a term that I was taught in Self-Reg called soft eyes really comes in. It's really important for teachers and parents and the people supporting teachers and children as they go back to school, where they need to use those soft eyes, that teachers are trying to figure it out as they go along.
So as Connie has mentioned, for adults to best be able to help children that we work with or live with, we need to identify what's going on for ourselves and how to self-regulate. Self-regulation is how we manage stress, or the energy and tension that we experience in our brains and our bodies. Dr. Shanker says that mindful self-regulation refers to how people manage energy expenditure, recovery, and restoration in ways that enhance growth. Mindful self-regulation requires learning to recognize and respond to stress in all its many facets, positive and negative, hidden and overt, and minor and traumatic. It is a skill that we develop through reflection, awareness, and practice. It is also a skill that children can learn by watching the role models in their lives and through the process of co-regulation. Co-regulation is how we help others to manage their stress, their energy and tension. As adults, if we want to help our children to become regulated, then we first need to self-regulate ourselves. We need to self-regulate in order to co-regulate. Stress is contagious. Research shows that we are constantly processing the feelings of people around us. The amygdala, a part of the brain, can read and identify an emotion in another person's face in 33 milliseconds, and just as quickly we can feel the same way. Adults set the tone for the environment. If the adults in a child's life are stressed, so the parents, teachers, caregivers, children will sense this and they will experience stress themselves. I remember when my oldest daughter was in grade 2, when the Spice Girls were the hugest thing. We lived in a smaller center and there was going to be a lip syncing contest in the mall. My daughter and her friend wanted to enter the contest, so we went to the mall. I was very proud of my daughter because I thought, oh, she's being so courageous. But I also remember feeling very anxious about having my daughter do something like dance and lip sync in front of a crowd of people. I remember I kept asking her, are you sure you want to do this? There are a lot of people here. She ended up not doing the act, and I believe my anxiety and my own fear influenced her decision. Another example I have is when my son was about 4 years old. He was terrified of thunder and lightning storms. He would immediately start to cry and scream and run into the house if we were outside, if he saw any dark clouds or thought he heard thunder. I remember one day when we were outside and it did look like a storm was approaching. Ryan started to cry and wanted to go into the house immediately. I was weeding in the garden and could see that the storm was quite a ways off. I could feel in my body that I was calm and aware of my surroundings. I told Ryan we could go inside, but we did have a few minutes before we needed to. I asked Ryan to take a few deep breaths. He had some paper and markers, and I asked him to look at the flowers in the yard and draw a picture. I could see him visibly relax. I had remained calm, and I know that this influenced his behavior. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed stress, even though you didn't know what had happened? Children do this all the time. They are watching the adults around them and seeing how they are dealing with the environment. If we want to help the children in our lives feel balanced and calm, we need to become aware of what is happening for ourselves and use tools and strategies to become self-regulated. So what do you do to reduce stress and care for yourself? Just think about or write down a couple of examples. For myself, I use things like exercise and journaling and meditation, as well as I use deep breathing. Connie, what about you?
So definitely the breathing thing, that I use that, as well as walking in nature, meditation as well, talking to a friend. This is a video of myself and my daughter Emma, and this is one of the things that we use to help calm ourselves down when we notice that we're starting to get overly stressed. Hi everyone, my name is Connie, and joining me today is my daughter Emma. And Emma and I are going to talk to you today about the importance of breathing as a strategy or a way to help calm down. So we all get upset, emotions like sad, angry, stressed, frustrated, tired, all of those things that we feel. And sometimes we start to say things we don't mean to, or yell, or get really angry sometimes, right? And so there is a tool that we use, what do we call it? Right, smell the flower, blow out the candle. And in all my research around parenting and brain awareness and stress awareness and self-regulation, this is the one tool that I have found to be most effective, and it's so simple. And it's great for young kids or even older adults as well. So we're going to practice this today. And so in your one hand, we have a flower, yes. And it can be whatever you want it to look like. What do you want yours to look like?
Pink and purple and smells.
And oh, and it smells really pretty too. Okay, so hers is pink and purple, but yours can be whatever color you want. And then in the other hand, what do we have?
Cupcake,
A cupcake with
a lamp candle.
with a lit candle in it. Yeah, so who doesn't love flowers and cupcakes with candles, right? So I want you to all take a deep breath in and pretend to smell the flower. And blow out the candle. Smell the flower. And blow out the candle. Smell the flower. All the way to your belly and blow out the candle. And take deep breath out when you blow out. Deep breath in, but an even longer exhale. And that helps to calm your brain-body connection down and to tell your body that everything's okay and to bring your thinking brain back online. So is this something you remind mommy to do sometimes? Yeah.
I'll be your reminder.
You're my reminder, yes. And she is a great little self-regulator for me. And what should we do now that we've smelt the flower and blown out the candle? Let's take the candle out and here's the cupcake. Nom, 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 nom. Thank you guys for joining us. Say goodbye.
Bye.
So hopefully you were able to do that, smell the flower and blow out the candle along with myself and Emma. These are some other strategies that you can do to help children to regulate. So if you notice that their energy and tension is getting to be too high, you might want to use movement as a way to help release some of that. Even something like doing a quick stretch or taking 3 deep breaths can help you to become more alert. You start to get the oxygen moving back into the brain, calm the heart rate down, and release some of that tension and energy. Things like going for a walk, doing a dance, getting laughter out is a way of moving that energy out. Maybe being out in nature, using things like fidget toys, wobble chairs, those bikes. There's some bikes that you can use in the back of the room if you really need to be moving. Those are all kinds of different strategies, and you can find many more icebreakers and energizers and types of ways to get the body moving.
Another thing that you can do to self-regulate or help the children in your lives self-regulate is to connect to your senses or connect the children to their senses. Dr. Schenker tells a great story about he was once in a school teaching some teachers about self-regulation. And one of the things that Dr. Schenker is known for is he says that there is no such thing as a bad kid. There was a teacher in the room who said, well, you haven't met my kid. I have a bad kid in my classroom. So Dr. Schenker was in the school and there were students there. So we thought, well, I haven't seen all children, so let's go into the classroom and I'll see if there's something that I can identify that would help you. Immediately when Dr. Schenker walked into the room, he could sense the kid that had been labeled as the bad kid. He could see that the child was experiencing high energy and high tension, that he was experiencing stressors. Dr. Schenker also noticed that the room was extremely bright, and it was one of those classrooms where there was lots of fluorescent lights. So Dr. Schenker just went, and there was natural light, there were windows. He just turned the lights down, and he could immediately see the child begin to relax. One of the hidden stressors that was happening for this child was he was very susceptible to the fluorescent light and the sound that those lights made. So by addressing that physical sense about the way that the child was seeing the room and hearing the light, was able to begin to calm down, begin to self-regulate. Other things that may work in a classroom could be have a child, if they're experiencing high energy and high tension, maybe have them take a sip of water from their water bottle. Maybe listen to some music in the classroom that is calming. Even smelling a flower, imagining smelling a flower, and imagining what that favorite scent is connecting the brain to the senses, which will allow for self-regulation to occur.
And then we can look at the emotional components that can be a stressor, that can be stressors for children, and strategies that you can use to reduce those stressors. So it might even be the way that the room is set up. Maybe there's a feeling associated with it. You know, maybe that you could have positive posters on the wall that give emotional support. You can use things like humor, even in the form of videos or jokes. Having the opportunity for children to interact with each other and to build friendships and emotional supports. You can use inspiring quotes, even in your teaching, that can help to activate the limbic system in a positive way. And also just things like teaching children about stress. So right here, I would like to make a plug for a resource through the Prevention Institute called My Curious Brain. It's a really great tool for children and adults about teaching some of this information to kids to help them identify for themselves when they're becoming too stressed, and to identify strategies that will work specifically for them. You can use things like using your hand on a scale of 1 to 5. If you have all your fingers up, maybe that's a 5 and it's a big stressor. Maybe if it's just a small stressor, it's just kind of your thumb up. So different strategies like that that can help children to identify their stress levels, and then also having kind of a checklist of things that they can do to reduce their stressors.
How we start and end each day can definitely impact how we are experiencing stress. For some, being woken up by an alarm clock can be very stressful. How we talk to ourselves impacts how we feel. I recently read the book, The Happiness Advantage by Sean Acor, and in that book, he talks about how waking in the morning and telling oneself that it's going to be a great day does actually influence how the day will go. It's also important to think about something positive before going to bed. If we're thinking about what went wrong during the day or worrying about all the things that we have to do the next day, that will influence how we sleep, and it won't be restful. There's been much research focusing on gratitude and ending the day by listing things that you're thankful for. By having that positive mindset will lead to a more restful sleep.
And when we're thinking about strategies, it's really important to remember that one size does not fit all. So what works for one child will not work for another. Maybe music is great for one kid, but not for another. Breathing activities or mindfulness activities, things like meditation, some people love them and others hate them. Even things like being in nature, some people love being in nature and other people may be really focused on the bugs or, the getting dirty, and it may be very stressful. So just in summary, we want you to think about one thing that you learned that was new, some kind of concept. Maybe it's about the definition of stress, thinking about it in a different way, returning to the original definition. Maybe it's about understanding stress as tension and energy. And then what about one thing that you learned from a heart knowledge perspective? So, like Jackie mentioned, the idea that it's not stress behavior, or it's not misbehavior, it's stress behavior. That was a big aha for me as well when I first heard Dr. Shanker speak. And that resonated with me for a long time, and trying to figure out how I could put that into being with my children and recognizing their behavior as stress behavior when I would have typically saw it as misbehavior. And then hopefully we've given you 1 or 2 strategies that you can add to your toolbox or motivated you to think about other strategies that you know will work for even one child in your room. Maybe they'll work for everybody, but maybe it's something that you know that that child that's spinning in the gym class, maybe you know you can get them to go for a walk if they need to. Whatever the strategy is, it's just adding that to your toolbox. The other thing we really hope that you take away from this is that it's so essential for you as an adult to first calm yourself down, to self-regulate for yourself, and that you as an adult are the best tool for the children in your lives. That by being calm yourself, that in and of itself will help children to be able to be calm. And that if you are stressed, if you have too much tension and energy or not enough energy, it's really hard to help children to calm down themselves. And these are just a few resources that we'd like to share. Particularly, I'd like to point out the website for selfreg.ca, where you can find lots of other resources that are free. Many of them are free. Some great graphics and visuals that you can use, as well as other additional resources that you can learn from. And a few resources for kids here that I've used both with my kids and with other children as well. So the one I really want to point out is My Curious Brain again, that you can get that through the Prevention Institute by calling or checking out our website, www.skprevention.ca. Great, there we go, and we're right on time. So like we mentioned, we don't want to keep people too much longer than the hour which we've allocated. There's a lot of information that is in this webinar, we realize that, and you can access it again if you want to go over the information again, or feel free to share it with others as well. And our website is at the bottom. Feel free to watch the video from there, as well as check out other resources. And Jackie and our email addresses are here too, if you have other questions that you'd like to ask us. Jackie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just wanted to remind you that we have recorded this webinar, and so we will be posting that on our website. And as soon as that link is available, I will send an email to all registrants, and feel free to share that if you wish. Again, I just really want to say thank you to everyone who participated. We know this is an extremely stressful time for all of us, and it just warms my heart to know that there are so many people out there wanting to connect with the children that we work with and live with, and help them be as healthy as they can be. So thanks so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, please email Connie or myself, and we'll get back to you. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.
Take care. Stay safe.
Yes.